Hi class, welcome to week 2 of group. Just wanted to highlight a couple things before we get started. I recognize that these PowerPoints are not on learning activities. I made these for myself just to kind of guide me through the lecture, and so I'd hit on main points. My lecture does not replace the textbook, okay? And I know that Yalom can be a bit overwhelming. It's very small text. Not to age myself, but it feels like very small text. And it can seem kind of difficult at times to kind of get into. But Yalom is like the father of group therapy, okay? And he's very wise in what he says. Also, there's a lot of great real life examples of group in Yalom's text. So that might be really helpful for you just to get better ideas of like what they're referring to. Also, like the tests, as if you haven't taken too many tests with Cal Baptist for your online courses, they really use things from the text. Like you need to look for them. I understand your tests are open note, open book. However, it's really specific and sometimes that can be a little overwhelming. So looking through the text before you take a test is probably super essential. So really I'm highlighting things, hopefully explaining them a little bit better, but I'm not meant to replace the book itself, nor are you going to necessarily get test answers from my lecture. So I just want to reiterate that. I'm here to try to guide you better through the course, help you out, shed some light, maybe give you some real life examples, but I'm not here to replace your books, okay? So looking on to group week 2 here, over kind of some main points of each chapter. There's a lot of information that's in these few chapters, so I'm trying to hit like main points, and I tried to break it down as best as I can, even while I was going through the text. So chapter 5's main points is talking about culture building, how does the leader shape norms, examples of therapeutic group norms, creation and maintenance of the group. So maintaining a group. Group leaders is responsible for creating and convening the group. So there's a lot of responsibility on a leader. You guys, when you do lead a group, you are hopefully selecting potentially the group depending on the type of group it is. You are maybe going to do some sort of interviewing, things of that nature that we'll talk about a little bit later. You prep the group for what the group is going to be about. You are the one thing that brings the group together. You're the common denominator. The reason everyone's there is because you're the leader and you're leading them on whatever the topic may be. And so just be mindful of that. Most people in group don't know each other. And so everyone's new, and we know how that can be awkward at times, right? So the therapist has to detour things that are going to threaten the group, like tardiness, absence, disrupting, scapegoating, things of that nature. Just like in a classroom setting, it's up to the professor to kind of correct those things that are potentially distracting. So to kind of better have a class that's enjoyable for all. We need to address the needs of the group as a whole, and not the individual needs, because this isn't necessarily individual therapy, this is group therapy, and we want to be mindful that this is always going to be a group, not just an individual thing. The therapist makes the norms, okay? It's a social system. They call it a microcosm. Members must feel the ability to share and comment and be honest. And this is also such a great learning thing for a lot of people. People don't know how to be honest and to share their feelings. They don't know how to be forthcoming and maybe give some negative feedback when necessary. And so a group hopefully will be a safe environment where someone could do that. We want people to feel the ability to be spontaneous. And we want these norms, whatever is created, to be encouraged and accepted. And it's established very early on. You will establish some sort of group rules. They'll probably be in your informed consent, things of that nature, which again, we'll talk about later. But we also want some level of knowing what's acceptable and not acceptable, kind of like social skills. We know things that you do socially. We may not have to explain it wholeheartedly. We just know, like, hey, you don't do that. Hey, you don't say that. The same kind of thing in group. You want some sort of kind of climate that is acceptable. And when something unacceptable happens, you address it right away, right? Because you want people to feel comfortable, to feel safe, to feel vulnerable. And if you don't feel like you can trust people, or you feel like someone is maybe downplaying what you're saying, then you may not feel comfortable to share. So you want to maybe transfer responsibility of group to members. You want to maybe just self-disclose. Now, self-disclosure can be very tricky. We're going to talk about that further, but some self-disclosure is beneficial. Not to mention, you want your group members to self-disclose. You want it to be appropriate, pertain to the material, make sense. Obviously, not make the group all about you as the leader, but use it in a way that it's beneficial and as a learning tool. I use self-disclosure from time to time as a learning tool, not necessarily at all as a way for me just to like chat it up with my clients, but as a way to kind of maybe relatability. You know, we want to, again, keep the momentum of the topic going in between meetings. So when you have one topic on one meeting, you want to make sure that coincides with goes into the next meeting. Some groups are like a step-by-step process. They go say it's 7 meetings and each meeting is building on the next to get to the end. And so those are things just to be mindful of as you're setting up this culture, this climate, this main maintenance of your group. Okay. Chapter 6 main points are the power source of the group, staying in the here and now, techniques for the here and now and illumination, and theory and use of past and present. So the power source. Okay, so they talk about socialization anxiety, something that can be brought up in the group due past. So sometimes people in a group or subjects can bring up things that remind people of the past. We sometimes can be triggered by people that remind us of someone, you know. I'm currently watching, well, catching up on the show called Vikings, and anyways, in this one scene, somebody reminds somebody of somebody else, and one of the main characters, and it just takes him back to this place that's emotional. I think creates some level of vulnerability, maybe sorrow, and it stirs a lot up for that person in this TV show. That's the same thing we can do. Someone can remind somebody of somebody else. Someone can talk about something that's familiar and it dredges up stuff. That's not staying in the here and now. That's bringing up the past. So trying to work through those things and address those things in a good way is going to be something that the group leader is going to do. So knowing how to interact with each other safely is important, and that's a big part of the group. And sometimes we can be fear of retaliation. Like I was very honest about some things, and now because I'm afraid that person's going to say something back to me, that's now controlling the group to some degree, right? Or maybe someone does retaliate, so we have to address it, you know, things of that nature. Because when people get hurt, even if it was well-meaning, there's a tendency to want to get back. So we got to work through those things because we don't want those kinds of things like the anxiety of the past. We don't want some of those things to be what's controlling the group. So again, staying in the here and now, focus on material going on in the group, not outside of group. So what's happening in this group versus what's happened outside of the group. And people want to sometimes bring a lot of the outside stuff in, and we were like, no, let's focus on the here and now. We're going to stay present. That's a big thing we talk about often in therapy in general, is staying present. And so especially in group, we want to focus on this because it's really easy to get distracted, sidetracked, and people start bringing in all this other stuff, right? We even see that sometimes in class. We see that sometimes just in regular kinds of groups like Bible study groups and all this stuff. I'm part of a Bible study and it's very regimented, which some people really appreciate, some people don't like. I, as a person that understands group dynamics, I understand a lot of the structure, because if you don't have structure, people will like bring up things or bring in things that can be all over the place. And as we know, with topics such as faith and religion and the Bible, there can be a lot of interpretations, and that can create conflict, right? And so sticking with something that's structured helps keep it within the right scope. And that's what we want to do with group. We want to keep group within where it's supposed to be and not go outside of that. Now, some groups are just a process group, and I don't mean just, but I mean that's just the style of what they are. So you just bring up like maybe things that are going on in your week or whatever. That may look a little different than something that's very specific topic wise, or a specific kind of chronic mental illness or whatever that may be, you know, grief group. Like if you're bringing in, I went shopping, you know, that may have nothing to do with what you're talking about and isn't necessarily helpful for the group. Illumination is when a group member brings something to light that could cause a rift or separation between a member and group. And so those are things that, it's good that it's being brought to light, but now we have to address it and work through it. Okay. So different techniques for the here and now. Moving from the outside and asking questions about what they are feeling in the moment, asking specific questions. So it's, again, bringing them back to here and now. And once they're in the here and now, then we want to know how they affect others. So how does this affect the people around us? Encouraging self-awareness, acknowledge how it impacts their desire to change, transfer this change from group to life, like, this is how this looks here. How could this affect your family if you were to do this more often? If you were to be able to receive maybe some criticism, even if it's like it was done in an appropriate way, like, how can you translate how you receive that so well right now to your family when they tell you something, making it applicable, and so that not only is maybe the person making positive change in group, but then they can make those positive changes in their home. And that's what makes groups so great, because there's a lot you can learn from group members. I think group is very cathartic, and I think some growth for people really happens in group, even more so than individual therapy, because you learn a lot from your members. Group can be very dynamic and can cause a lot of great change. It also can be very destructive if you don't have a handle on it, and that's where it really comes down to the clinician to have a really good handle on the group and really not be too worried to deal with conflict and things of that nature, because it's just going to come up. You have a group of people, like, conflict is natural. It's part of life. It's how we handle it is where it's problematic, right? And we have a lot of people coming to group that aren't going to handle conflict super well. And so it's going to be a learning process, but that doesn't mean it has to be negative. It can be really positive. And a lot of people need to learn how to use conflict, okay, and use it well. Okay, so chapter 7, transparency. So being open and honest with the group, I think that's a modeling thing. Like, not only are we modeling to them what that looks like for the group, but we're also showing them, like, I can be transparent too. I'm not here to rule over you necessarily. Like, I am the group leader, but I can be a transparent person too. I can be vulnerable to some degree. And I want to deal with the here and now as well. Trying to work through that with the clients so that they can see the here and now and work through that with you. It's not meant for it to be about the therapist at all. And it's not meant to be a way to control the group, but it's just as a way to kind of make it more of a cathartic setting. I think modeling, just really trying to show the group members, like, hey, this is how we function, this is how we do things. I am like a part of this group as much as you are. I'm just the one that's kind of the leader. Obviously not kind of leader, I am the leader, but I'm also a part of this, right? It's kind of like we're the body of Christ. Like, we need each part to function. Like, the leader is needed for the group to function, but they're also a part of the group, right? It's not that you are better than them. You are a part of them. And a lot of times people leave group for specific reasons. Sometimes people lead recovery groups because they've been in recovery. A lot of times, like, people like to lead grief groups because they've experienced grief. A divorce group because they've gone through a divorce, or they've walked closely with someone that's gone through a divorce. So a lot of times some groups are appealing to us because of our own personal life experiences, and that doesn't necessarily have to be avoided. I think that's one of the things that's so great about group, especially a group that has, like, maybe isn't closed to like people coming in and going. So you might have group members who have been through something and have been through it for a long time, kind of like an AA group, let's just say. You have people who have been sober for years, and you have people who have been sober for a day, hours. And what the nice dynamic of it is you're able to see, like, I can do this because this person's made it. I know it's hard for me right now, but I can, like, look to these other people and see, like, they're taking it one day at a time and they're getting further in their journey. Like, so even though I'm here, like, these people can relate to where I'm at because they remember, versus maybe someone who's never experienced it before. A lot of group members, or group leaders, I'm sorry, have those same experiences. And so sometimes that can shed that can create some comfort, shed some light, show some vulnerability, which makes more buy-in for group members because it's like this person understands me, they gets me. Now, you can lead a group in recovery and have never struggled with addiction, but that doesn't mean that you're not able to support. Like, you probably have known people that have struggled with addiction, you know, whether you've known them closely or not, it's kind of irrelevant. But I'm just saying, you know, sharing sometimes our own personal experiences with the topic or the subject matter can help us to be vulnerable, to be transparent, to maybe even give some self-disclosure in an appropriate way, and create some buy-in for the group members, and really just help you to be relatable, because we are not better than our clients. Like, whether it be a group, private practice, whatever it may be. Like, I am not better than any one person that comes in my office. By the grace of God, there go I. I can be anybody, right? Anybody. But I think we need a humble attitude when leading people, because I think people will see that. Because we aren't the leader because we're better than, we're the leader because we've been given that opportunity, you know, and we want to use that appropriately, and really use that to hopefully help these people to learn something and grow and develop as they're in this group. So, and I've had groups that have gone really well, and I've had group situations that didn't. So it's learning to work through that. And I think even as a group leader, and this we'll talk about further, but we have to be open to possibly negative feedback. And sometimes that can be hard because it feels so personal, but I think we can't grow as a leader unless we acknowledge like areas that we need growth in too. You know, we have those surveys at the end of each class, and it's not meant to be, I mean, yes, you guys can write whatever you want at the end of the survey, but it's meant to kind of help to the professor to see areas where they need to grow and to see areas that worked really well. And that's meant to be a way for us to grow, you know, not just to be critical, you know, and that can be very intimidating for some people, but I mean, some people embrace it and then make changes and then feel better, you know. And the reality is, if someone can give you feedback that's not positive, and you can weigh that feedback and decide, is this true or is this not true, and then move forward with whatever you decide. And so I think as a group leader, you have to be ready for that, because as we're modeling doing some of those things with members, we have to be ready for whatever they may say to us, okay? And we can't get too hurt or too offended. Now, they may not always do it in the best way, but we have to model back maybe how they could do it better, maybe what was good about the way that they said that, maybe, you know, process that through the group. So again, it's an opportunity for the group to see those things and work through those things with you. So I hope this is helpful. I try not to go on too long because I know, you know, I might be background noise while you're doing something else. Also, too, I really want you to listen to the lectures, and maybe if you know if it's not an hour, you're more willing to listen to the lecture. But I just hope this is a quick overview, kind of breakdown of some topics that are covered in these chapters. I wish you all the best as you're working through all this stuff. I hope you're finding your groups for your capstone projects. And if you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to contact me. Talk to you soon.